Hello, and welcome to Recession-Proofing Your Career. Today's talk, or tonight's, or wherever you are, is all about reaching the stability that you want and deserve for the career trajectory you're on, whether it's as a product manager or as an aspiring product manager. So let's start sharing and let's get into all of the goodness of what you will need to recession-proof. So today's talk is for people who are stuck and feeling unsure of what lies ahead or how to navigate that path forward. And of course, at a time like now, with all the economic and otherwise uncertainty, it's understandable if you're in this position. It's also for people who find themselves needing to pivot during this global crisis time. So maybe you've been furloughed, maybe something else substantial has changed in your life, and you absolutely need to make a significant shift right now. And also people who simply want to have more of a strategic approach for your long-term career to gain that security and confidence so that you can feel that stable growth as you move forward. So some of the things we will cover. We're going to cover the 4 mistakes that you're likely making right now that are holding you back from that confident place, that secure place in your career. And in particular, we'll talk about how others use their personal brand to their advantage instead of waiting in the wings. So you might notice for some other people, it seems like they seamlessly move through. How are they doing that? This is part of that. How to evaluate a pivot. So if you're really considering making a drastic change, when and where should you go? Like, when should you make that change? Where should you end up? These are really important questions. And also how to effectively deal with the feeling of insecurity that just comes through overall career development, or in particular, if you're in the middle of or considering a job search, of course, that will lead to feelings of insecurity. So is this you? Do you see others making that money and progress in their career that you want, but you have no idea how to do it for yourself? Or have you invested in your career, but you haven't found that stable success that you wanted? Or maybe instead of investing, you've held yourself back, unclear on where to focus. Do you feel capable of contributing so much more to this world that, again, you're not sure how to get into that position to make that happen? And then really underneath all of this, do you secretly fear that you may never find a career setup that will make you happy, pay you what you're worth, and help you unleash and unlock that full potential that you have? So really what we want to do here is, and this real issue is that you haven't mastered these 4 tips that I'm about to share. And so once you've mastered and moved beyond these mistakes that you might be making now, you will have a strategic approach to follow so that you can increase your future career stability. You will showcase your abilities and accomplishments in a way that gets you hired, that gets your future employer really excited about you. And you will be more confident in your career path wherever it ends up, whether it has a pivot or just a renewed focus on where you were already going. In case we haven't met before, my name is Jocelyn Miller, and I have over 15 years experience working at companies like Amazon, Google, Zazzle, doing things from engineering to acting as a product leader. And now I act as a personal accelerator for individuals just like you to help you achieve those multiple 6-figure incomes, high impact careers, and fulfilling lives. I strongly believe that career is such a foundational pillar to your life, and we always want to get that on track so that your whole life can flourish, so that you can have those other values as well. And I've, trained and coached thousands of people over the years, using my background from all of the above, from having worked with people like you, as well as having studied cognitive science and computer science, which I always talk about as having studied people and machines. And those are two really important components to getting careers on track. So with all of this, let's dive in and discover these 4 simple tips. First mistake, not having a clear brand. And I want to invite you to really consider for each of these mistakes, where are you on this right now? Do you have a clear brand? Are you clear on what your brand is? Or are you unsure? And you might have noticed that you only get one story on LinkedIn. You don't get to say, I do X, but sometimes Y and also Z. You just get one story. And it seems like on LinkedIn, people either tend to have super long profiles with everything they ever did, or nearly no information. And I want to tell you that either way, rather than being found and getting that right opportunity, recruiters aren't even seeing you because you're either too much, too little. It's almost like this Goldilocks problem. If you're listing everything you ever did and that you love dogs, but that doesn't relate to your job at all, it might be a distraction if half your profile is dedicated to that. Again, we want to have a holistic understanding of you, but it's still LinkedIn is fundamentally the top professional branding platform. And we want to make sure that what you have is strong. And and I also want to mention to you, you might know this cognitively, but might not be thinking about it. You are also, just as we all are, generally easily findable online. Or if you aren't, what does that mean? Meaning you might think to yourself, well, luckily I have very little social media presence or online presence, so isn't that great? That's also going to raise questions. So especially if you want to become, say, a product manager at a place like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn itself, it's kind of hard to do that when you show up and say, oh, well, actually, I don't have a LinkedIn profile. If you want to actually work in these industries and in these companies, we want you to have a strong presence and a strong brand. So this first tip, create and manage your brand. You likely either have very little presence or you perhaps haven't fully thought through how your branding is coming across. So this is the time to do that. And what you in particular want to do is focus on telling today's story based on your goal. So I know a number of you who are joining with product school, you might be, particularly wanting to become a product manager or get into that product overall realm. Okay, great. If that's the case, if you've decided that you want to make that pivot, then what story do you need to be telling? It's likely different from the story that you needed to tell for the job that you have today if you're pre-pivot. And again, it's great to decide to pivot. It's totally doable. But what is that story? And for some of you, you might not yet know, do I want to do that? So if you're in that situation, what story should you be telling? What is your next goal? And then with all of that, describe your experience and include information based on that goal, but no more or no less. Meaning, again, maybe you could have a smidge of personal info, but really you don't want to confuse matters is the whole point. So when you're talking about your experiences, it's funny, one of the examples I often use, I've had a long time in e-commerce, but also when I was younger, I did a stint in physical commerce as well. And when I was in high school and college, I worked at a clothing company and, got a bunch of great, beautiful clothes. That was great. But what it also added was I knew more about physical commerce in addition to e-commerce. And so when I was applying to companies for whom that story was interesting, I might include that job from so many years ago to say, hey, I understand the physical and I understand the digital. But that all said, I would rarely talk about that job otherwise because it's rarely relevant. So this is the kind of thing that you want to be factoring in as you craft this brand of yours. You want to own your brand across all of your online presences. So whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, LinkedIn, your own website, you really want to own this brand. And you want to use all the tools that are provided. Now, again, I'm going to focus mostly on LinkedIn because most of you either do or should have a presence there. And all those other things can be factors in you managing your brand. But for those of you on LinkedIn, you might not even realize a picture makes you 7 times more likely to be viewed. So that, nondescript headshot that you have where it's not filled in, that's not doing you any good. Now, a summary also helps synopsize your story. So especially for those of you who are looking to switch roles and make some kind of shift. So if you're trying to get into product management, but the majority of your time has been spent in sales or marketing, great. Tell me the story about how your in-depth sales knowledge really informs you of the customer and gives you a deep customer understanding, and how you consistently collaborate with your product team to continuously improve the product and then be able to sell it more effectively. Like, draw those lines for me so that I don't just look at you as a recruiter or hiring manager and say, I don't understand why they're applying to this, or I don't understand what we're talking. And instead, you're saying, I have this in-depth knowledge, and here's how it informs where I'm going from here. And then finally, your headline. It shows up everywhere. So again, that's another way to synopsize. The summary is more of a written out version. The headline is the super bite-sized version of your story, who you are, where you're going. And you might want to say, I'm a product person, I'm a, whatever it is. But also, the other thing that I want to mention with all of these things, so they're so important. And I want to encourage you, as you're creating and managing this brand, look at yourself on mobile, look at yourself on desktop, look at yourself on tablet. People are using all kinds of devices. Mobile is the most heavily used in general, but again, you want to understand, how are you appearing? This is part of creating and managing your brand. Now, another mistake you might be making, having all the eggs in one basket. You know this, I'm sure you know this cliche, but there's a reason why it's so used. And what does it mean here? I want to say people often view having a corporate job, especially in a big company, as stable, secure, and certain. And, that's great for while you have it. But anyone who's been in the workforce in 2008, certainly in 2020, or even just in an unlucky situation, whether it's Lehman, Yahoo, whatever. I mean, there's so many companies that have had so many major shifts. You know the truth. And the truth here is that even without a major economic downturn or the specific company not doing well, shifts even in direction, investment, and focus happen all the time. So, I mean, I was talking to a client recently who got his great position in a big company, right, like maybe about 6 months to a year before 2020 and all of its craziness hit. That company that he's working for has had a lot of difficulty during 2020 because the nature of the business is more in that travel and experience industry, and they've had a bunch of layoffs. Now, he has luckily managed that his team and that like subsection of what he's working on, they have avoided any layoffs. However, that's somewhat random. I mean, he could have just as easily ended up on a team that had been eliminated during this time, and it would have been due to no fault of his own. So this is one of the reasons why having all your eggs in one basket can be dangerous. And I want to really emphasize to you, you are the only constant. These companies, and again, they may even mean well, but at the end of the day, if there's a part of the company that isn't performing, if it's not, getting the kinds of outcomes that are needed for that company, they're going to have to make some really hard decisions. And often that's going to yield, people being moved around, not being in a stable place, regardless of how good you are, even if you are good. So this is something to really understand. And so the second tip here is to create a side hustle. So what this really comes down to is diversifying your income streams is really an essential way to build actual stability. If that's what you're focused on, that is a fabulous way to do it. But now with that in mind, there are many ways to do this. You can use investments, passive income channels, etc. But we particularly want to talk about this side hustle point. And the reason for that is it tends to be very accessible, and it means that you can create an income stream and even expand your skill set and your career boundaries via a side hustle. And it may even lead to a pivot later. So if you're doing a particular job now and you're considering something else, what a great way for you to try that out and see if there's any traction in the market that you want to serve. So again, some great options here. And this is really a smattering. This isn't everything. Not all of it will be applicable to you, but I just want to give you an overview of a number of options. So for example, gig work, very accessible. Again, might not be the place that you start, but I also want you to understand if something isn't going the way that you want, all of these can be options to you. So driving for Uber or Lyft, or doing gig economy stuff with Upwork or Fiverr, or even getting people's groceries or deliveries with Instacart, Postmates, DoorDash. There's all of this work that's very accessible. And again, it may not be the thing that you're most interested in. It may not be at a rate that you're interested in. But if you're in a jam, it's a way that you can absolutely create some stability, get some funds quickly. Coaching, training, and tutoring, all of these things are really open to you. So is there something like maybe you're really great at a sport and you can get into tennis coaching, or you want to coach people, like your presentation skills are really great and you've learned a ton in that. And so maybe you become a coach in that. Tutoring, maybe you speak a second language and you want to teach, whether it's adults, whether it's kids, you can get into tutoring or any kind of like training here. So if you have some particular skill set, this is a great place to highlight that. Then there's overall freelancing. So you can do various things, like so many companies and so many even small businesses, like I can tell you, being one myself, need help with managing ads, managing social media posts, virtual assistant overall. Any of that can be possible. And then consulting. So one of the things I want to bring up here, a lot of people talk about blogging or vlogging, videos, etc., writing an ebook. Those things can be useful, and like you absolutely can build up an audience. You can, if you build up a big enough audience, especially with vlogging or blogging or, creating a YouTube channel, then you absolutely can explore things like monetizing and all kinds of stuff. But with that in mind, I do want to say that those two tend to be a longer lead time. So while they can be a great strategic direction, if you're in a situation where you're like, I need to create something right now that's putting money in my pocket and that's really making me feel more stable, secure, or maybe even helping you pay some bills, whatever it is, then those are really longer term. And for the shorter term stuff, you want to look at what is your expertise that you're bringing to the table, and could you do that on the side? Could you, if you're a salesperson, if you're a social media expert, if you're a marketing expert, can you, a designer, whatever it is, UX, UI, whatever, if you have a particular expertise, maybe you could come in and help a company via consulting. Now, I do want to mention, for those of you who are also doing a full-time job, be careful in this space. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing isn't jeopardizing your main work. So if you have like a non-compete or something, if you have, some IP restrictions in terms of intellectual property for the things that you create, you'll want to make sure that the way in which you're approaching this is kosher within your overall context. But again, can be a great way to expand and your experience, and your overall stability here. Other options, selling, Etsy, eBay, Amazon, Facebook, Marketplace. Like there's so many different places that you can sell. And you can sell things that you already own. You could sell things other people own on their behalf. You could make things on, for Etsy. So many people during COVID in 2020 started manufacturing masks and selling them. So you can do any of those things. Even content creation. Maybe this is something that you're particularly good at or you want to get good at. But so many people are capable of doing, basic copywriting or proofreading may well be very accessible to you. Maybe you can do better than just basic and, you're a whiz with the words. And so that becomes your shtick. Or video editing. It might be something, whether it's very basic or whether it's super advanced, or if it starts basic and becomes advanced, that's something you're interested in. This is absolutely an accessible side hustle. Another option, Airbnb or real estate. Again, some of these things may make more or less sense for your life and at a particular time, but I just want you to see that there are many options available to you. All right, so another mistake here, sticking with what is safe. And I picked this photo because I think it's so hilarious, right? It's like someone who looks like they're in their house behind a computer and have a mask on. You're like, it's a little extra safety. It might not be necessary. So look, the status quo, your normal life, it tends to feel safe. That's primarily because it's just comfortable. It's something that you're used to. And if you've been in your position or your industry or your company for more than 5 years, in some industries, some companies, some positions, maybe even 2 to 3 years, you may have stopped growing. And I want you to really ask yourself right now, am I still growing? In what ways am I still growing? In what places? Maybe it's not in your career, but somewhere else. That's great. But what does it mean for your career? So we want to really honestly ask and answer this question. And with this in mind, there's a phrase like grow or die, and it's kind of true, right? It's like in this overall world where we're either blossoming and growing, expanding in our own ways. It doesn't mean that you have to be innovating the newest drug or something. It doesn't need to be at the edge of all of humanity. But there is this element of, as we develop as human beings, that we have this tendency to want to see growth and want to see progress. And so how is that looking for you? And so really, this gets back to that potential pivot. Evaluate your industry and evaluate your potential pivot options. Is there a way that you can switch either dramatically or subtly that will put you on this really great upward growth trajectory in your career? And one of the things I want to point out, especially in these tricky economic times, one of the things I often talk about, asymmetric impact. With a situation like COVID, even 2008, all these different situations, there tend to be parts of the market that don't do well. And at the same time, there tend to be other parts of the market that do extremely well. So for example, if you were a hotel chain when COVID-19 hit the world, not a great situation to be in. Hospitality, hotel, not great. However, if you were making PPE or you were capable of making PPE, great situation. If you're making disinfectant products, great situation. If you are in biotech working on vaccines or similar, great situation. So how does that asymmetric impact affect your industry? Are you in a place that's really struggling and hobbling along, a high growth trajectory? Is it something that only applies for this period of time but doesn't continue? Or is it something that we expect will continue? Overall, is your industry growing or contracting? And again, each of these questions are really meant to be asked and honestly answered. And are you personally accelerating in your job or your level? Is there even a place to go from here? Oftentimes, we will end up in a situation where we're already at the top of where we could go. And so if that's the case for you, is that okay? In another 3, 2, 4, 5 years, is that okay? Or are we dissatisfied at that point? Again, so some industry and pivot options. So I want to talk about with you, and again, this isn't everything. It's just a sample of what are some high growth industries and some generally stable industries. And I want to put a big asterisk on that because, again, with any of these dramatic events in the world, our foundational assumptions are tested and sometimes no longer hold true. But like things that have been happening during the 2020 time, healthcare, hugely growing industry, hugely needed. But again, even with that, where are you sitting within there? If you're sitting in, and again, as you see next, health tech, lots of investment going in there, especially in the vaccine realm and, different kinds of innovations. So yes, a lot of opportunity there, but there's also been highs and lows within that. Lots of doctors and nurses needed for, treating COVID patients during a certain period of time. And then in certain situations, a oversaturation of that and almost like too many were available. So again, depends on where you are in your situation, but generally a growing industry at, given that situation. Fintech still continues to grow quite well. Cloud and overall, so when I say cloud, I mean, we've got Google Cloud, we've got Amazon Web Services, any of these fully hosted solutions that are, in this, what we constantly call the cloud, those tend to be doing well. Video conferencing, Zoom, it was amazing because their stock went up dramatically from very early on during the pandemic, and their usage went up, very dramatically as well. In fact, a company that is almost has its name, but like its ticker symbol looks kind of like Zoom, but it's not. Their stock went up accidentally because people didn't know which one was which. So it's crazy outcomes during these times. But again, that tends to be doing well. Autonomous vehicles. So that was an already growing industry. And now, a lot more people are interested in doing individual transportation to maintain that social distance. So, if we can get to autonomous vehicles faster, I know I mentioned Uber and Lyft before, but if they were using autonomous vehicles, maybe people would be even more interested in using them. Meal kits. Meal kits, they've again been growing for quite some time, but with everyone being so much more at home during this time and that trend somewhat continuing with remote work, there's a bigger need for easily made or consumed meals, and especially for families, things like this. So that tends to be growing. Cannabis, not specifically relevant to this time, except for maybe the overall anxiety people are feeling, but because so much regulation has changed over the years, that industry is growing. And tech overall, e-commerce tends to be growing as well, but especially those businesses that have some kind of correlation with Amazon or Amazon directly. And then we've got this set of businesses that tend to be more stable. So we've got like accounting, mechanics, plumbers, dental, medical, more as like those front lines than necessarily working from the management perspective. But again, all of these things are just ideas to understand, are you in one of these situations? Is your industry on the more stable side, and that's how you tend to be a little bit more recession proof, or is it on this high growth side so that it might not always forever be recession proof, but it does pretty well during like these most recent that we've seen? So again, just evaluate this and figure out, where do you think your industry is, if it's listed or not, and what is something that could be accessible to you that maybe is even higher growth, and what might that mean for a potential pivot? Now, another mistake here, complacency or autopilot. And as you see, that very lazy cat is definitely complacent here. With all that, are you feeling like everything's just fine or just blah? If you're in that state, that can be an indicator that you're in this, having this mistake happen. Maybe you even debate whether you should do more. Like you feel like you should be doing things, but you maybe aren't even sure where to start or what even to do exactly. And a lot of times when we're starting to feel overwhelmed, if we don't know what we should be doing, but we have this instinct to do, we can end up in this place where we're just like, Netflix, just keep playing. I don't know what to do with all of this. And you may find in this situation what got you to the point that you're at now, if that's a decent place, it may not work again. So it may have worked before, but if you want to get to a next level, tends to be that we need to change the way that we're approaching things and shift in some way to really change level. And so here, tip 4, skill up and grow. This is such a great time to add to your skill set, to really expand your knowledge and your experience. So based on where you want to go next, all these different options which we went over, which again, if you need personal guidance on that, we can talk about that towards the end. But based on where you want to go next, whether it's a side hustle, pivot, up leveling, or combination of those things, what skills do people have in what you want that you don't have right now? This is a great way to just do, it's like a skills gap analysis where you say, well, everyone who, is in product has like a technical background. Then you're like, is that true? But anyway, we can talk about that separately. But if if you feel like the people who are in the position that you want have a specific skill that you don't have, what's it going to take to acquire that? Like, can you do that now? Now, the other thing, and this is something where it becomes an art here, what can be a competitive advantage for you? So sometimes you might want to focus on this gap and say, oh, I want to really acquire the skills that I don't have that other people have to get into that league. Other times, or maybe proportionally or something, you want to also look at what can be a competitive advantage. Maybe you can develop in some way that these other people don't have, or you already have something that's competitive that you can get even better at. And that can be the thing that gets you in the door, so that you say, look, I'm not the most technical, but I am super analytical and I'm detail oriented and I'm fabulous with people and I build fast rapport. And so bring me in and I can help you double your business because I've done that in my last 3 jobs. It's something like this, right? What can you bring? And again, maybe that's an area to develop. But either way, start learning, growing, using, like if it's all about, you want to become an expert in Google AdWords, whatever it is, start using what these things are that you really want to be great at. Get certified, and I almost want to put an asterisk by that, if it's useful, right? If it's actually going to be helpful to you with where you're going. And there's certain things where, like, if you want to become like a CPA, I mean, literally it's in the title, right? Certified public accountant. Like there's certain things, becoming a lawyer, you have to get certified. Other things, it might not make sense. But either way, you want to look at this area and figure out how you're going to skill up and grow. Now, with all of this, I know we're talking about a lot of mistakes, a lot of solutions. I want you to know this is all possible. So maybe this is your future. When I started working with Dana, she was coming off of co-founding a super stressful startup. She wanted to get to a place where she could support her goals of buying a home, starting a family, maybe even living with less stress, though that felt really far off at that time. And so through our work, and despite even being in the midst of COVID, we got multiple offers, negotiated, and she ended up in a workplace in a health tech company where the biggest challenge is that it's not panicked. So it's actually quite supportive. She's moving into more responsibility as she grows within that company. She even recently moved into her new home and is working on that family. So really, this is possible even during times that feel difficult, that feel uncertain. Relatedly, a bonus mistake, as Dana was having some of this when we got together here, is panicking, right? It's look, with all the uncertainty in the world, it is understandable, and especially if you're dealing with a layoff or a furlough or some similarly difficult situation, it's understandable that it may have you panicked. And that the thing is, panic tends to lead you either to standing still and staying still from overwhelm, like we talked about. I'm just gonna be like that cat and just, watch Netflix. Or you tend to be running in all directions at once. So you might be dropping resumes everywhere for any job, in any place, at any time, in any position, but not getting anywhere as a result because nothing's really focused or targeted. And so either way, panic is not going to help matters. It can be understandable, it can be emotionally relevant, and something that can be empathized with. And yet we would like to move beyond this as quickly as possible so that you can move into this next phase. And so the bonus tip here is get prepared to make your move. There are always a set of steps needed to make a shift, the kinds of shifts that we're discussing here. And those include, getting success ready, mindset. You've probably heard a lot about mindset. You may be working on it, you may not be, you may have worked on it some, you may say, oh, this is such nonsense. But I will tell you, getting into a really solid mindset. So if you have ever experienced imposter syndrome, that's not going to help you. Like if you're constantly questioning yourself, that's not going to help you. Versus getting into a strong place where you're confident in what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're doing, that's going to help. And also that clarity of vision. Where do you want to go? Is it a pivot? Is it climbing up the ladder? Is it getting a side hustle? What is that vision that you are after? Even incorporating other elements of your life so that you understand the motivation. Number 2 here, master networking. You absolutely can network in a way that is sustainable over the long term and is not slimy or sleazy or doesn't feel bad or weird. And you can do it during this mostly digital time. All of that is possible. And I will tell you that networking is what's going to lead you to getting referrals if you're switching positions. And the impact on your probability of landing a job with that goes from like 1% to 35, 40%. I mean, it's a massive change. So you really want to master networking now and overall in your career. You want to have that top-notch marketing, really managing that brand the way we talked about, from resume, LinkedIn, and all throughout all of your material. You want to nail interviewing. So when you get on site, and in this case, it's often going to be in a Zoom like this, but you want to really nail that interviewing, connect with your potential employer, make that really great. And you want to ultimately negotiate and be confident there. That might seem really far off and something you just don't even want to do in a questionable time. But I will tell you, negotiation isn't about adversity, and it's not about being difficult. It's about really setting yourself up so that the place that you're going, the job that you're taking, the position that you're taking, the level that you're taking, money, all of this, that it is done in a way that actually works for you, that you aren't just taking something because you're feeling desperate, but rather setting yourself up for success for when you actually start the job. A lot of people can lose sight of that. And so all of the above are critical for a job search, and actually they're the basis for a strong career foundation overall. And again, there's so many examples here. When Abby and I started working, she was unhappy working together. She was unhappy in her job for nearly a year. She had hit a ceiling in that company, and things weren't going super well. She had been going from being a top performer to getting some negative criticism, and that was really atypical for her. And so we worked together to get her to land that dream job with a Fortune 100 company that got her a 50% increase financially. And she continues to grow and upskill today, creating that positive growth trajectory. So she used all these tools that we're talking about here. Ken, another great example. He was at a very bro type startup company. Some of you may have either been in there or might be in there now. That super didn't jive with the collaborative and innovative culture that he really wanted. And so he was grappling with wanting to make it to a next best and all of this. We built up his confidence and his focus. Startup ended up letting him go. And he said it would have crushed him if we weren't working together. But luckily at that time we were. And he was able to land that dream job very quickly and ended up in exactly the company and culture that he wanted with a package. His total package was 300% what he was making before. So just imagine, even if you've come to this place where you've been furloughed, where you feel like it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, is there anything possible ahead? You know, this happened here with Ken, and yet got to a place where it was so much better, financially and otherwise. And in fact, I spoke with him recently, and he was saying that this company, we expected it to be a certain way, and it has been for now quite some time. So it really has turned out quite well. So to recap, today we covered how and why to approach your career from a position of growth, whether it's a job search or anything in your career growth from a position of strength, and what shifts you need to make now in order to ensure this more stable future. And then finally, how to powerfully present yourself to people who can hire you and leave them wanting more. So what you're going to need to create and manage your personal brand. So important. You're going to need to create that side hustle, especially for some of you who like just have one thing going on. Maybe you're thinking of shifting or exploring. Such a fabulous way to really explore something else. Evaluate your industry and a potential pivot. Sometimes we're like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain and it just keeps falling back down. And if you're in an industry or a job where you're feeling that way, it's really time to explore where else should we be going. Skill up and grow. Take this time, these difficult changes in life as an invitation to really ramp up who you are, what you bring to the table, and grow as a person. And then finally, get prepared to make your move. So whether it's all of the mindset work, the vision, mastering networking, interviewing, negotiating, all of those things that we covered, get prepared. If you take these steps, you will absolutely succeed in getting your recession-proof career set up with a dream job and that ongoing success that you so desire and deserve. So what's next? You can go it alone, take the things we've talked about here, and try to figure it out on your own as you have been. And I hope you do take these tips and use them. But if you want more, you can jump into an opportunity where I'm going to lay out the side-by-side or step-by-step process with you side by side so that you can catapult your career to your next level. So who's this for? You must be a professional who values having high-impact careers. You've been in the industry for a bit. You're not necessarily a new grad, but maybe you've done a few years or more. I work with people at every level. You must want to take your talents to that next level and unleash your core mission in life. And you must be 100% all in, committed, decisive, ready to take action, knowing that you want this area of your life to be an amazing success. And who's it not for? So if you're not ready to make a major shift right now in your life and career, that's fine. Just, it's not for you right now, and that's fine. And if you're totally fine with things continuing exactly as they have been, if a year from now things look very much the same and that's fine with you, go enjoy. Like, that's great, but this isn't for you right now. And if you're not willing and able to invest and really focus on this area of your life right now, then that's okay, but it means that this isn't for you. But again, maybe you want one of these futures. Alice had spent almost all of her career in one company. She had wanted to venture out, but she wasn't quite sure where to go. And initially, as she left, she was thinking, well, I think I just need another job because that's all she knew. Through her coaching work, she saw new opportunities and ultimately united her mission for social good with her career to become an international technical coach. So she, obviously right now travels a little more limited, but she's been able to generally travel or in this case, work more remotely with people in third world countries and different companies supporting them. as well as spending time with her family and having that meaningful impact. And she also continues to upgrade her self-marketing skills to grow her business. So again, all the things we're discussing, they will play out not just at landing jobs, not just thinking about that next pivot, but really throughout your career. These skills are essential. Another example, Erica had been job searching for over a year. She knew her methods weren't working, but she wasn't sure what to do, and she knew she would just start doing more of the same because she didn't have another option. She wanted to pivot into product, but it just wasn't happening. During our work, she gained the clarity and tools. She ultimately had two opportunities doing exactly what she wanted. She continues to refine her vision, and her career expands. So these are the things to really understand. So why am I doing this? I love helping people get to their next level. Even when I was in corporate, I would hire people, train them, and then I would, help them just continue to expand. Like I wouldn't stay just in that spot with them, but I would help lead them or, again, help them continuously grow. And it's really my life's mission to help you make the discoveries, innovations, and breakthroughs that keep the world moving forward. Plus, I know you might need the help. So if you need it, please take advantage because maybe you'll look like Serena at the end of the day. She had been in finance for, again, needing the same company for all of her career, felt done, but she wasn't sure where to go. She was the breadwinner for her family of four, so she was quite nervous to take a leap at that point, and yet also knew it was time. And we worked together to discover what she loved, and she ended up taking this amazing adventure into the technology space. And now she's running a digital transformation for a country. That hadn't been something she even fathomed before. She ended up doing this international move with her family because it totally made sense, put them in a culture they were loving, and her in a position that worked for her and her family. And it was just an amazing shift. So you can end up doing something like this too, whatever your version is. So think about how much is it costing you to stay where you are? And if you'd like that more personalized help, please feel free to sign up. You can see the link here, bit.ly.com/discovery call with Jocelyn. Spaces are limited, but I invite you to sign up, fill in the form, let us know what's going on with you. And if we can help you get into this recession-proof career place, we absolutely will, and we'll show you that path. If not, no worries and no pressure. We'll point you in a great direction. But either way, I hope that you take the learnings from tonight's talk or today's talk or wherever you are, take advantage of all of these tips, all of these mistakes that you might be making, correct them with the tips. And I just hope to really have helped you see a more positive trajectory. So with all of that, so great seeing and meeting you all virtually. And please enjoy, best of luck, and talk to you soon. Bye.